Round one of the Holy War on the hardwoods in the Big 12 era goes in favor of Utah, but BYU really only has themselves to blame because I've only got two words for the Cougars in that loss, and what are they? Free throws.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and more importantly, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. BYU falls in Big 12 action to their arch rival Utah 73-72 Saturday night. This is a special postcast edition of the podcast, and really, I look at that game, and yes, there's a lot of things you could point to, the free throw disparity, the foul disparity. There's a lot of things you can point to and say, well, that's what cost BYU the game. What cost BYU the game is their inability to make clutch free throws. This is a team that has got a lot of really good parts to it. I really like the talent overall. I like the way the BYU runs a lot of their sets. They shoot the three at a pretty decent clip. They play pretty good team defense across the board, it feels like. But when you step to the line late in the game and you have a 1-point deficit, you have a 1-and-1, and you strong arm a free throw, clank it off the back iron, that pretty much seals a win for your opponent, that ain't it. And Trevin Knell, he's going to be the GOAT, and the wrong type of GOAT, obviously, in this circumstance. He's a 26-year-old super senior who's a career 78% free throw shooter. And I'm not going to lie, when he stepped to that line, you can ask my wife. Very few of you probably know her, but you can ask her because I was sitting right next to her. And I told her, he's going to miss this. Clank, and that's all she wrote essentially for BYU. Yes, I understand that you had a chance to tie or take the lead late with 5 seconds, and then Jaeger Demon comes down to the court and hoists up a really ill-advised fall-away three. Really felt reminiscent of what happened at TCU. Just so many things went wrong for BYU in this game, but the inability to make free throws in clutch situations, it's inexcusable. It's just downright inexcusable at this point for BYU. I don't know what they need to do, whether it's shooting 100 after every day at practice. They need to get with their mental performance coach and change strategies. They got to do something. I'm sick of hearing the excuses being floated out there from the coaches and everybody else involved with BYU basketball about their inability to make free throws. It is inexcusable at this point. It's an abysmal number. I know that they only had 10 free throws. They deserved more because there were some pretty clear fouls that were not called in that game. College basketball officiating is a pox on the sport. I will continue to say that till my dying day, until something changes, because the officiating, I'm talking across the sport, it's abysmal. It does the sport no favors in many respects. But the bigger point to be made here is BYU had a chance to win that basketball game and clanked it away at the line. You can't be 40% from the free throw line in a 1-point loss. That is just ain't it. Other things, BYU let Ezra Ausar, excuse me, still dealing with the remnants of that flu that I've been dealing with this week. So apologies for the cough there. But Ezra Ausar, 24 of his career high 26 points in the second half. Stop that guy. Find a way to slow him down. Fuseni Traore, Keba Keita. I don't care what it takes. Get the ball out of his hands. That circumstance felt a lot like what happened against Houston against Texas Tech for BYU. Texas Tech got the ball inside and just absolutely bullied BYU on the interior. Ezra Ausar did the exact thing for Utah in this game. BYU has to be able to adjust their defensive schemes, and that comes down to coaching. The coaches have to recognize that on the bench and dream up something, draw up something, get the players to get the ball out of Ezra Ausar's hands, because he was an absolute bull in a china shop, and props to him. He made BYU pay for their inability to stop him, and was a big reason why Utah ground out that win. I look at this game. Excuse me. Wow. We are struggling today. But bigger point to be made here is BYU is in a pretty rough spot right now. They're 2-4 in conference. Had you asked me at any point before the Big 12 season began, would Utah ever be ahead of BYU in the Big 12 standings, I would have said, absolutely not. It's just not going to happen. Utah was expected to be one of the teams that was just bottom rung Big 12 this year. But look at it right now. Utah's 3-3 in the Big 12. They're 500 in conference, whereas BYU's a game under. They're 2-4. They're quickly running out of runway to have any chance at pushing for an NCAA tournament berth. And maybe it's already gone, quite frankly, for this BYU basketball team. That's disappointing because, like I said, I like a lot of the pieces of this team, but it just feels like in so many different ways, this team is hamstrung, and it's hamstrung itself in these games of this variety. The other thing about this is BYU's inability to hang tough with some of these teams. It just won't cut it. BYU has to be able to be a more physically imposing team. Fousseyni Traore or Keba Keita, they're two really, really well put together athletes. But outside of them, who else are the physical specimens that BYU, they're not even physical specimens, but who are the physical players BYU can rely upon to bring that proverbial punch to the matchup? They just don't have that seemingly right now. I want to see more from guys like Richie Saunders and Dallin Hall, especially late in these games. Too often, Jaeger Demon is taking these late shots, and they are nowhere near what they need to be. What is he now? Is he 5 of 30 from 3 this season? Last 30 attempts, 5 of 30, I think, is his overall percentage. I like him as a player, but I'm telling you, if they're going to defer to him late in games, that's the wrong scenario for this BYU basketball team. You've got to get guys like a Dallin Hall. And I know he was 0 for in this game, 0 for 5 from the field, played 30-plus minutes. I would like to see him get more opportunities, speaking of Hall. But you got to find a way to generate better looks. And more importantly, I think get the ball out of Jaeger's hands late in those scenarios. Rewatching that play, I'll credit Utah. Their defense is pretty solid. They did a really good job sticking with their men on that. I know Trevenell had his hands up like he wanted the ball, and he's got the ability to fire it in very tight quarters. Maybe Jaeger should have given that ball off, but it's also, why are you shooting the three? Why are you not pushing for the rim? Why are you not trying to cross over a guy and get as close to the rim as possible? You only need 2 points to win that game. So I just look at the whole kit and caboodle of this loss for BYU, and it's a really, really gut-wrenching, disappointing loss for BYU because now they're just continuing to kind of wallow in a hole here that we would have liked to have seen BYU work their way out of. I said it at the start of this week. It needed to be a 2-0 week for BYU. They went 1-1, and they came so close, it felt like, to go in 0-2. Because remember, that game earlier in the week against Oklahoma State, they led a 27-point lead slip from 27 points all the way down to 3 before they restored some order. Where is the kill shot from this team? Where is that? We're stepping on the proverbial neck of the opponent, and this thing's over. It doesn't feel like there's an aggression factor for BYU or an ability to kill off a game and say, yeah, this thing's over. They got to find that. They got to find it quick because, like I said, that runway for a chance at the bubble, being in the Big 12 upper echelons, being in the NCAA tournament, the runway is running out really quick. You're going through essentially the weakest part of your Big 12 slate right now, and you're still just 2-4 in conference. 1-5, 1-4 in their last 5 games. It's not a good stretch of basketball for BYU against what, like I said, is supposed to be the weaker of your conference games. So really, really tough loss for BYU to absorb. A lot of things to improve upon, a lot of things to learn. But I'll go back to what I started with. BYU's inability to make free throws in general, just the free throw percentages are frankly atrocious, but the late in game scenarios, if I'm an opponent of BYU, I'm getting extra physical and I'm going to put BYU with the free throw line and say, beat us at the charity stripe. If you can do that, props to you. But right now, wouldn't you attack BYU that very same way? I would. And BYU's got to be able to figure out a way to turn that around and turn it around very, very quickly. All right. That's going to do it for this postcast edition of the show. It's always fun to sit down and kind of get some of my thoughts out. We'll have more for you guys on our full edition on Monday. Looking back, I'll probably think more about this and here's some additional thoughts on BYU basketball. Maybe actually rewatch the game, get a better feel for it with a second viewing. But nonetheless, tough loss for BYU in that hole that they're in. They got to find a way to work themselves out of it. They got to find a way to work out of it very, very quickly. And we'll have more for you guys coming up on a future edition of Locked On Cougars. So as always, thank you for all your support. Please subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your family and friends if you think it's of value to you. Appreciate all that you guys do to support this podcast already, and looking forward to doing a lot more with it in coming days and weeks and years, as we always say. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And thank you once again to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.